My AirPod fell.
Isaac was shot. Both of those are good books.
Okay.
The second book that I would recommend.
Wait, redo
Bless
that.
you.
Redo that. All over everyone.
I turned my head. We got some good bloopers on this one.
Welcome back, Second Pagers. This is Phebe, Isaac, and Phil with Beyond the First Page podcast. I'm Phebe.
I'm Isaac.
I'm Phil.
And we are today talking about The Fury by Alex Michaelides. And before we get started, I just want to remind everybody that we will be talking about spoilers and major plot points throughout the podcast. So especially with something as suspenseful as The Fury, really recommend that you read the book first and then listen to the podcast so we don't ruin anything for you. Also, if you like this podcast, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Spotify, follow us on Instagram, and you can find us wherever you get your podcasts. And I think with all of that being said, we are going to talk today a little bit about books that got us back into reading. And I think Isaac is going to go first with that.
Yeah, mine is Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. It's a great sci-fi feel-good novel.
Nice.
My recommendation for anybody to get back into reading is actually just to reread a book that you loved. If you loved the fantasy, maybe like a Percy Jackson. If you love thrillers, Girl with the Dragon Tattoo is great. But just pick something that you know you loved and read it again. Right?
That's great advice. I wish I had thought of that. But mine is City of Girls by Elizabeth Gilbert. And I like some of her other novels as well. But this one in particular, I loved. It really resonated with me. It's about a girl moving to New York City. It's a coming of age and she makes a lot of mistakes. It's about fashion, about love, and about friendship. It's very interesting and highly recommend it to anyone who hasn't read and is trying to get back into reading. So those are our three recommendations for the week. And I think with that, Isaac is going to tell us about The Fury in 60 seconds.
Okay, gang, this is a book about a group of friends who are all connected through one person, really, Lana. She's an ex-movie star that stopped working, moved to London, and this group goes to her private island. It's a private Greek island, and there the group's relationships quickly unravel, and the story unfolds with multiple flashbacks and twists. It's narrated by Elliot, Lana's close and maybe best friend, and also the main character. And the story goes through trying to find out who killed who on the Greek island.
So we originally picked this book because it's the same author as The Silent Patient, which is Alex Michaelides. And if you have not read The Silent Patient, highly recommend. And we do also want to say that if you listen to this episode, potentially The Silent Patient will also get spoiled for you. So maybe check out The Silent Patient before you listen to this as well, because as we'll get into
also before you read this book, because the book itself spoils The Silent Patient.
Yeah.
So if you want to read The Silent Patient, stop what you're doing right now and read The Silent Patient.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I think Isaac did not read The Silent Patient, so now that's forever ruined for him. You're welcome, Isaac.
It's okay. Before you stop listening, give us a good 5-star review on Spotify, though.
Yeah. Exactly.
You're welcome.
So could you just explain to everyone the Michelin star scale and how we rate books on the podcast?
Yeah, so on the podcast, we do a 1 to 3 stars, well, 0 to 3 stars, actually, and it's based off the Michelin scale. So it's a bit harder than Goodreads. So a 1 star is actually a pretty okay rating. So the Michelin scale is sort of 3. We would recommend this book to anybody and we'd read it again. 2, we'd recommend it, but we probably wouldn't read it again. 1, the book was fine. We got through it. And then 0, we did not like the book. So this was a 0 for me because I read The Silent Patient, and we'll get into that a little bit later. If I hadn't read The Silent Patient, it probably would have been a 1.
Yeah, it was a 1 for me. I would maybe recommend it to somebody who is trying to get back into reading, to be honest with you. It's a very quick read. It's easy to understand. It's a good beach read since summer is coming up. And it didn't feel like a waste of my time. I'll say that.
Okay. The standard is, did it waste my time or not? I was a 1 as well. And as the listeners will see, we'll get into why we all centered kind of around that 0 to 1 score.
Yeah, and just really quick, that's a good plug too. Phil mentioned our scale is harsher than Goodreads, and we just wanted to, for simplicity, keep it, that 1 to 3 range with maybe some zeros. But if you are interested in what we're reading, our books on a Goodreads scale, go ahead and check out our Goodreads. The link's in our Instagram bio. So please, if you're interested in what else we're reading on the side, that's another great avenue to see what books we're enjoying.
And I'm currently writing reviews on Goodreads just out to the ether. So if anyone actually wants to read those, I actually am loving it. I'm pretending everyone's reading my Goodreads review.
Anyways, so yes, something that we all commented on, and actually this was not something I noticed, but Phil and Isaac both noticed this and wanted to talk about it, was this kind of idea of point of view. And so before we talk about that, actually, I think I'll be able to educate both of you as well, since I did a little background into this. But we're talking about like the fourth dimension, and maybe there's some terminology I'm not understanding. But what the Fury does in this book is it addresses the reader itself, and that's called ethereal intrusion. So it's actually a narrative technique. It's not necessarily classified as a point of view, but just as kind of a maybe English lit refresher for all of our viewers, because Phil, Isaac, and I also had issues remembering which was each of the 3 point of views. So the first one is from the perspective of the main character. So first point of view is perspective of the main character. Second point of view, which actually I could not think of a single book that I've read that does this, but it addresses the reader as you. So the main character is you, like capital Y U. So like you are sitting on the beach and you are feeling the wind through your hair, that kind of thing. And I don't know, Phil or Isaac, if you've read a book from the second person.
I will, but I finish all the characters and then I'll tell you about it.
So then the third person omniscient is when the narrator knows everything about everyone and is just a subjective like overview. It's not from any point of view of any character, but they know everything about each of the characters. So therefore you as the reader do. And then you have the third person objective, which is only what you've observed. So only what the narrator can actually see, not the inner dialogue of the characters. And then you have third person limited, which is, one character very in depth or very well. So you can hear their inner thoughts. So Phil, yeah, you were going to tell us about a second person.
Yeah, the only second person I've ever read was N.K. Jemison's 5th season book. What really makes this interesting is that it's actually, what you don't realize is it's actually, spoiler alert, the same character, and she takes the present is in the second person, the past is in the third person, and her like future self is in the first person or whatever. It's the 1, 2, 3. She does all of them. It's just the same character at different times, which is really hard. You realize in maybe the 6th chapter when finally the person uses her name in the second person that it's the same character the entire time.
I'm sure AP English classes just had a field day with that one.
Well, I was thinking second person would only be ever poetry.
Expand your mind, bro.
That wasn't any of the books that came up as like examples of second person, but we'll see. We're reading a poetry book, not next week, but the following or in 4 weeks. So maybe we'll see some examples of
that, or I still don't understand it, but
yeah.
I know I had to actually look up like what is an example, and then it wasn't helpful because I was like, I've read none of these.
No, it's very limited for sure.
But yeah, so kind of going back to this idea of point of view or this ethereal intrusion, and when you're engaging directly with the reader, how that changes your perspective as a reader and how it would, in your mind, in my opinion, just kind of starting us off here, think it would build trust between you and the author. But I think in this case, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, for me, it built immediate distrust with the author that he was addressing us directly.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, this is the stock case of an unreliable narrator. It was so stock that he tells you he's unreliable.
But I don't think that because
So
you knew to distrust him from the start. So does that make him unreliable?
yeah, maybe reliable, whatever. You didn't trust the narrator, which is usually the breaking the fourth dimension or the fourth parallel or whatever is this establishment of trust. You're right, Phoebe, but definitely not in this one.
His conversation with the reader, to me, felt like he was having this conversation only to drag out the story. He was that kind of person that sits there and gets you kind of engaged in a conversation, and then you find yourself stuck there and you're trying to leave, and he's just leading you along with information because
hand on the
this
door, hand on
the door.
Yeah,
because if he had just told you everything and had been a trustworthy narrator, this book would have been over in a chapter. He would have just told the story.
Right.
But
Right.
it got drawn out, and it leads to him also becoming delusional. And I didn't really necessarily think he was untrustworthy from the beginning, but very quickly you realize I thought he was delusional starting in part 2. And that's what made him untrustworthy for me.
What about part 2? When in part 2, or why suddenly in part 2, Isaac, did you realize like, oh, this man is
so
unhinged,
when he starts talking about his feelings for Lana and how they're soulmates, and I don't know I can't remember the exact words he used, but
yeah,
he was talking about this, and I thought he was gay, and I thought it was
I thought so too.
A friendship that he was holding in higher esteem than all his other friendships, because there was the way he was talking, there was no romance, it was
Right.
obsession. And then you realize, okay, this guy is off his rocker, and then he became untrustworthy to me.
The only reason that it took Isaac until part 2 is because he didn't read The Silent Patient.
Right.
I mean, the whole thing about The Silent Patient is that it's this unveiling at the end that the narrator's unreliable, and the narrator did it.
Yeah.
And so when we're sort of introduced to this unreliable narrator that seems a little unhinged, right from the start, I was like, this guy did it.
Right.
And then he did it. And that's why after reading The Silent Patient, I was thoroughly unimpressed with this one.
And I think even if you read The Silent Patient now, Isaac, it would still be so hard for you to believe that the narrator was the person that did the thing because of the way it's written. And it's just written so much better, in my opinion. The twists are so much crazier. Everything is just written better.
To advance on Isaac's point of the hand being on the door, he knows his conversation is uninteresting, and so he's trying to dangle. There was so much dangling in this book. There was so much.
What examples can you think of?
When she dies initially, and then she doesn't actually die. When I think he ends every chapter with, and that was the last time we did this, or like even the start where he's like, I gotta give you the background. Do you know?
Do you really? So kind of going back to this authorial intrusion, I mean, what was the added benefit?
I think the author wanted the cliffhangers, and this kind of brings up another point that we can discuss, but I think it led to the cliffhangers, and the author wanted to give the cliffhangers. So my kind of question or thought for you guys is, so we all kind of agreed that not our favorite book, but and we didn't like the narrator, but is that good writing because we ended up not liking the narrator, and the narrator was this delusional psychopath? Did he write that character well, and is that good writing, even though we didn't kind of end up the book? And I feel like it is. So I would like to give Alex Michaelides props, at least, for writing a hateful character that I believe was supposed to be hateful.
Right.
Didn't make me like the book anymore necessarily, but I think he did a good job doing that.
I would counter that with a question too of thinking of another thriller. Some actually perfect example, Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. Thinking of a different thriller and then thinking of this book, I would maybe disagree with you a little bit, Isaac, because I do think that Alex Michaelides is a good author, and I really liked The Silent Patient. But I think comparing this to a different thriller, even though yes, the character was unlike, I feel like it's easy to like it. Okay, I shouldn't say
Oh, I was
easy
gonna
to
say
write.
there's so much you can do to make characters unlikable, especially if you have full access into their
Brain.
thoughts.
Yeah, it's like Casual
I
Vacancy.
think that, yeah, I mean, I think very similarly to actually two books we've read so far, Casual Vacancy and My Sister's Keeper. Every character in this book sucked. I mean, there was actually no single good character. There
Wait,
was
in the
one maybe
Fury,
in
Phil?
Casual Vacancy. Yeah, the Fury, these characters were
What about
horrible.
her
The
son?
father,
Oh no, because he was a dick at the end.
that you like the
No,
son?
I
Yeah.
forgot.
Maybe unlikable wasn't the greatest adjective, but delusional or unhinged. Everyone's, has their own opinion. But I thought he wrote someone who was turned out to be a psycho pretty well. Good enough to keep me reading.
Yeah.
See, if that was his aim, yes. I think the book would have been much better if you didn't know he was unhinged the entire time. And then you found out that he planned this entire murder. That would have been interesting.
Like he released the whole plot too early.
Right. That was the best part of the silent bit. You trusted this guy the entire time. He was the therapist. He was the very rational voice. And then turns out he's a psychopath.
Mm-hmm.
This guy, psychopath. Oh, turns out he's a little bit more of a psychopath than you initially thought.
But it gets turned on him. That's what I thought the twist was, not necessarily him being the psychopath planning this murder that doesn't happen, but the twist that then his friends are also a little bit psychotic, I guess, enough to turn his own thing against him. Yeah, I don't know. I just don't think this is a strong enough story that it could have been written from third person limited or third person omniscient enough to get somebody else.
I agree with that.
If this book had been written that way and we weren't reading it for the book club, I would have stopped reading. But if we weren't listening to this book for the book club, because I had started it, the cliffhangers were there and you needed that ethereal intrusion. You needed that to give the cliffhangers good enough to keep someone interested.
I think it's interesting, though, Isaac, having a different perspective as someone who did not read The Silent Patient versus someone who had. And I'm curious, had he read that first, if your opinion, Isaac, would be different maybe than what I think you're giving him a little more grace, and I think we're being a little harsher because of the other writing that we've seen of his.
Yeah, and I will say I did not see the twist of them turning the play back on him. I did not see that happening. I thought he was the killer. I didn't think that Lana was dead, and I thought he was going to end up killing somebody else. But I did not see no one eventually dying and him being turned
crazy.
Yeah, like it turned against him.
Yeah.
Well, and Lana did end up dying then, for clarity. He kills her.
Yeah, originally though.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that brings us definitely to something else we all three had sentiment on, which was the idea that his world and his friends turned on him so quickly, and trying to figure out as the reader, okay, your best friend just slept with your husband, yet you're going to be more pissed off at your other best friend because in your mind, all he's done is written a play about killing your husband. He hasn't executed anything. He is a playwright, quote unquote, because actually you find out he's not. But I was just like, what the hell is going on? Why do these people turn on him? Why is he so hated?
Mine was a slightly different take. I think I had less trouble believing that he was hated just because I sort of hated him. But my take was it was so quick. Lana literally plans out a fake, let's set him up and kill me. And then she's part of that planning, but then she flips the switch when she realizes that that wasn't an in the moment conversation. She agreed to it, but she was mad in the moment, drunk. But she still agreed to it. And then he's like, oh, he led me in this conversation. I'm going to actually do this entire elaborate plan and screw with him. Also, just very sort of wild way to do this. I'm going to lock myself up on the island with this murderer. That seems like a high risk, low reward scenario.
Yeah.
Yeah, like just confront him and be done.
Yeah.
And this can go back to the unreliable narrator or the kind of psychotic characters overall, but my biggest problem with it was she plans this play with him and they're drunk or whatever. She finds out that he was leading her this way the whole time, but then gets so mad, right? Mad enough that she doesn't trust him anymore. But then her other friend, Kate, convinces her to do the same thing to him, and then she's all on board. She just burned this bridge and now she's doing the exact same thing that she is just said that she should call the police on this guy, and then she goes around and says, okay, I'll just continue it. I'll just
the exact
go it
same.
on a little bit more. And that's where I think they all kind of, and maybe it's the narrator influence. So I don't even know. I was just like, this doesn't make any sense.
That's a really good
tie
point.
all three of our points together. Isaac was like, oh, Kate convinced her to do this. I was like, she switched so quickly. And Phoebe was like, why is she trusting Kate at all? Kate just slept with her husband.
Yeah.
I sort of just planned my husband's murder because this woman was cheating, but I'm just going to trust her.
What was the message there then? If we're saying all that, so if we're saying suddenly this, like, what was that trying to prove or point out? Was it trying to say life sucks? Was it trying to say, this kid let his childhood, and that was kind of an underlying theme too, his childhood then bleed into adulthood, and he was bullied and he had this horrible past, and obviously then that comes with so much trauma. So was that the point that he didn't get the help he needed, and then this horrible, I guess I struggle to see a point in all of this,
I think that's just where it comes. I don't think it was that strong of a story, and where
to
they
be able to
needed
bring it
all
home.
the narrator tricks to even turn it into a story. I just don't think the story was that strong. That good.
Yeah.
That's what I thought. I don't think there is a point. I think it's a murder mystery that is
it was just
a weak murder mystery.
I will say I love that he stole Barbara West's play after he killed her, or maybe didn't kill her.
I didn't get that relationship at all.
Is she?
Well, that was
he was a grown man. Just leave.
Well,
Isaac.
But I don't think
abusive relationships are not that simple.
Well, that and he had no funding. He admits at the end he was useless essentially. Like he was living off of everything that he gave her, but so he couldn't really go anywhere or do anything for himself. It sounded like
it's one spotlight of this book is that I actually had to look up Barbara West.
Wait, is she a real person?
She sounds so real. No, but Barbara West? Wow. Great name choice.
Did you guys have any quotes you wanted to share that you liked from the book?
I just had two. One that he says quite a bit, character is fate, and it could be a little bit of foreshadowing there. And then the second one, also a little bit of foreshadowing. We are the unreliable narrators of our own lives. So we definitely talked about unreliable narrators.
That was my quote as well.
Mine was a little bit more positive. It's like falling in love, isn't it, when you make a new friend? And thinking about Elliot, it makes me not like this quote, but I don't know, going to a lot of camps as a kid, and when you meet that one kid that you're just like, damn, dude, I really wish we grew up together. Like,
yeah,
it's pretty cool.
Well, then that kind of brings us to books that you would like if you liked this book. And I think when we do a book that we didn't really necessarily enjoy that much, we're trying to recommend you a book that has a similar sentiment, but is, in our opinion, more well done, or we enjoyed more, or whatever the case may be. So I'll just say mine. It's The Christie Affair by Nina de Gramont. And it is a fictional story about the disappearance of Agatha Christie. So that's a real thing that happened. Agatha Christie disappeared for 11 days in 1926, and this story is a fictional rendition of that, depicting what happened in those days, and it's in that time period. It's a very good book. It's a easy read, and I think it does a better job of keeping the reader in suspense without overdoing the whole drama of the situation. So that would be mine. Phil, what's yours?
Mine is The Woman in the Window by A.J. Finn. Phoebe, you would actually, if you haven't read this,
It's
you would
on my
love
list
it.
to read.
It's phenomenal.
Wait, would Isaac like it, or why are you saying
this
just me?
Well, just because I know how much you like The Silent Patient, I don't think it's as much Isaac's cup of tea as yours. I do think you would like it, Isaac. It's about a woman who suffers from agoraphobia, so she can't go outside. And this entire time, that's actually all I'm going to leave you with because I really want you to read it.
What about you, Isaac?
So I feel the same way about mine. I don't want to give too much away. It's called Who is Maud Dixon? This was actually a book I listened to on the way to Buffalo before I almost died in the snowstorm. But it kept me up for 18 hours. It kept me up for 18 hours. A lot of twists and turns. It's about a intern who's trying to become a writer, ends up getting hired by a woman who lives in secret and writes under the pseudonym Maud Dixon. And she is hired to help her with her next book.
It sounds interesting. I'll put both of those on my to-be read list. And then I think now we will recommend books that we've read recently that we really enjoy, that we think our readers would love. So the most recent book trilogy that I just read, it's called the Live Ship Trader series. It's by Robin Hobb. And I would say if you liked the Kingkiller Chronicles by Patrick Rothfuss, and if you like the Shades of Magic series by V.E. Schwab, you would like this. Could not put that series down. And then a book I also just finished was The Mother-Daughter Murder Night. And I would say this book is a pretty good mix between Where the Crawdads Sing and The Thursday Murder Club, which I've talked about on the podcast before. It's about a mother, daughter, and grandmother solving a murder together. So that's how they connect. It's a pretty good book. I would recommend it. What about you, Phil? What are you reading?
Nice. Yeah, so I just finished Master of Sorrows. Very good. It was Justin Call's first novel. Everyone was saying sort of like Name in the Wind. I actually think it was more like Blood Song by Anthony Ryan. There's a lot of fantasy tropes. He goes to school and is training, and then there's a big test. And if he passes the test, he'll join the guild and then there's the master apprentice, and then also a religion. But it's tied together in a good way. It was good. The second book I would recommend is The Identity Trap by Yasha Monk. And this one I would actually recommend to you if you were sort of dissatisfied with Doppelganger. This guy gives wokeism a very fair shake. He actually gives you a history of the movement and just actually very informative in first part. And then he sort of gives some novel ideas why we should entertain it and what we can learn from it. Just like one of those books that's very political, but you feel that it gave everyone in the party a fair shake, and we can learn from all these diverse perspectives. Really, really good.
I'm assuming that's nonfiction.
Correct.
Okay. So halfway through, I was like, wait, this doesn't sound like a fantasy book. And then, Isaac, what are you reading?
I am reading the second book in the Essex Dog trilogy. It's by Dan Jones. I actually just finished the first one too, so I'm kind of ripping through them. They're pretty good. It's about the English invasion of France and the 100 Years' War is what it's leading to, but this is kind of the first year of it. Historical fiction.
Interesting.
And it's cool.
99 more or less.
Yeah, it's cool because the characters are fictional, but in the beginning of every chapter, there are quotes from actual writings from that time. So that it's following real events, which is neat.
Cool.
And if you liked the Saxon series by Bernard Cornwell, you would really like this as well. Very similar theme. The show The Last Kingdom on Netflix is based off of those books. So 2 good reads there.
Interesting. Okay, so just a reminder again, we will be reading The Hunter by Tana French on May 20th. We'll be discussing that. And if you have not read The Searcher yet by Tana French, that is the prequel to that book. And we do recommend that you read that before you read The Hunter. And I will introduce our next book. I think I can sum it up pretty quickly. It's about a woman who enlists in the army to be a nurse during Vietnam. And it is by Kristen Hanna. She writes a very compelling historical fiction, in my opinion. She's the author of The Nightingale and The Great Alone. And I started this book and I'm really enjoying it. And I've heard pretty good reviews about it. So I'm excited to talk with the two of you about it and with our followers as well. I think that brings us to the close of discussing The Fury by Alex Michaelides. And with that, this is your bi-weekly reminder to call somebody that you love and talk to them about a good book that you've read. And especially if that person is your sibling, that would be great. Go to your local library, get a great book, use your Libby app, and stay classy, second pagers. Until next time.
See you guys.
Bye, guys.